We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast, the podcast where we talk about...
Everything theater. We make life easy. Hi there, I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs. It is lovely to talk to you all this morning.
Yeah, there's so much theater going on in the capital region, homegrown, world premieres, and tour companies, and that's where we're headed with you today.
Yeah, we are talking with Cassie from Six, the musical, the sensation, playing Anne Boleyn, correct?
Yes, Anne Boleyn.
And
Ooh.
really, Cassie, who haven't you played in this? This is not your first trip to the rodeo.
It is not my first trip to the rodeo. I've been at the Palace for over 2.5 years. I've done just about everything. I started as an alternate, took on Universal, which meant I played 4 of the 6 queens. Aragon, Boleyn, Cleves, Howard. And then just recently, last month, transferred over and am now on stage full-time Anne Boleyn, which is...
Woo-hoo!
Yeah,
And you
my
were dance captain, weren't you?
I also, yeah, to name a few. I also was the dance captain for the tour and for Broadway.
And listen, if you need a PR person, we're it. We'll
Yeah.
keep you covered, girl.
And for our listeners who are been living in a hole for a couple of years and don't know what Six is about, it's about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. And since you've played a couple of these queens, do you have a favorite?
Like, my question to you is it like a favorite story to tell, or is it just like, who's my favorite?
Oh,
Both.
yeah.
You said, yes, Anne. Gosh, I can't answer any of those because I love playing all of them. It's like choosing children. That's what I've always said. I'm like, I don't know. They're all special for different reasons. I really loved and had a special place in my heart for Catherine Howard, who's pink. Sometimes colors are like the way that people know, or song, which is all you want to do. I don't know. I love pink. She was the very first one that I learned, but the more and more that I'm doing Boleyn and really, because, doing multiple, there's only so much that you can accomplish in flushing these characters out. And the more and more that I'm doing Anne Boleyn consistently, the more I'm just really enjoying her chaotic, earnest nature to her. And my Boleyn happens to be more of like a rocker, but also very quirky. So I think I'm enjoying that one, like telling her story, if that.
She's green.
And she's green. Her sleeves may be green, but her lipstick's red.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to show off the nails, Cassie.
Okay, I'll show off the nails. Wait, well, not this
Woo!
one. Aren't they? There we go.
Wow.
Amazing.
Now, they're beautiful. I can never do the gems again. They get caught on everything. But aren't they pretty?
Yeah. Do you guys take a nail person with you? Do you have to find somebody in every city?
We do have to find somebody in every city. Yep.
Wow.
But we do have friends that are like the guinea pigs, if you will, the ones that are like, okay, I'm just doing like a basic gel. Because our nail game is strong on Six the Musical. So yeah, we have people that will go and like test out a place or two and be like, okay, this place is legit. And then like the real nail queens come out. They're like, okay.
Now, I was curious, because really this show, if you haven't seen it, it's almost like more of a rock concert than your typical musical theater. It's not Rodgers and Hammerstein, right? So,
Definitely not Rodgers and Hammerstein, no.
And we've heard like a lot in the last couple, months, in the last year of, articles of places where there's been confrontation of fans like singing along to musicals and some conflict that is created in the audience. And this is a show that, this is a huge fan following and people know these songs before they've even seen the show. So, twofold question. Do you find that there's a lot of singing along with the audience? And if so, is that encouraged or is it a distraction?
Oh my goodness, I think completely encouraged. Six, the musical, has what we call in the theater, fourth wall, which means we speak directly to our audience. We make full eye contact. And for that reason, I think we love to connect a little bit more in a different way. And so we call the audience the seventh queen. Also, Six does designated sing along shows that are scheduled, and they're really just so special. They're electrifying. And I love seeing people in the audience that are, like waving their hands and, the song Six proper, or singing along with us, and just putting context to what they have learned. So many people, myself included, knew the album ahead of time before ever seeing the show. Because it did, when it was supposed to open on Broadway, it shut down that very day for the pandemic. So for me, personally, that album was one of my pandemic albums, as I like to call it, where I just listened to it over and over. I had no clue what the show was about other than the Six Wives of Henry VIII. And so it's really fun to see people sit in the audience, know all the words, and to give them kind of the visual component of it. I love it. So yeah, come sing with us. Heck yeah.
Is that fun as an actor to, I was gonna say, is that fun as an actor to does it make every performance feel different than like doing a more traditional show because you have so much audience interaction?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Plus it takes a little bit of time to get comfortable to being like that one-on-one with a person. It actually is part of the audition process, but especially being on stage, it is so much energy coming at you at once. And so now that I'm used to it, I really enjoy, like playing with audience members. Sometimes you even get to know some of their personalities, their humor, their things like that as the show goes on. But yeah, it's different. It's very different. But I love it.
That's where I was headed, was to ask you about, breaking that fourth wall. And that's a big change. I know we all do. We know performers who look over the heads of the audience rather than look in their eye. And the minute you look in their eye, where did my lines go? And how does it change it? Give us a little sense, Cassie, of how it was for you initially making that adjustment.
Sure. That's a great question. Well, as I said, I was an alternate to begin with. And so my mind really was on, where do I go? And what do I say? So it was less so about really connecting with the audience. But as time has gone on, the biggest difference, I think, is having that sort of like innate comfort and confidence that has come over time to then, and also, right, like it's a show, we do it 8 times a week. And so I personally have carved in moments where I know that there's, an opportunity or time, or, I have, 2 or 3 lines until it is my line, to where I can have those designated moments with a person. And I think that has evolved over time and has been really key, because certainly in the beginning I would like look at a person and then all of a sudden, it's like whack-a-mole. Six is what they call kind of like an amoeba. I have named it like a hive mind. It's kind of like, a soccer team. We have kind of just like all moved together. And so for that, I say that because our scenes are like popcorn. Like we finish each other's sentences. They say that we're kind of like a 6-headed monster, if you will. So if you're not focused in, it's gone. You know what I mean? Like if you miss the line, the next one's already happened. So yeah, it has taken some time, but in the beginning it would be like whack-a-mole. You're like, should I look at a person? Oh gosh, I missed my line, type of thing. So yeah, I'm grateful that it's not that anymore.
How was the house in Schenectady at Proctor's?
I think that so I've played Proctor's before. I played Mrs. Wormwood in the first national of Matilda the musical. And I loved it then. It just couldn't be cuter here. And the theater's so beautiful, those chandeliers, please. But I think this is my favorite venue so far. And I'm going to tell you why. Speaking of the fourth wall, or the non-existence of one, they have put chairs in the front where the pit would be. And it's very, I would liken it to the Broadway theater, the Lena Horne, where Six is playing on Broadway. And you are quite literally like, yesterday I said, oh, they are right there. They are looking up our noses, like right there. And for us, especially like on tour, sometimes people are so far away. You know, the Fox in Atlanta where we opened a few weeks ago, just like so far away, 4,600 people. It's crazy. And I loved the people that were in like the first couple of rows. You can see all of these like built inside, I want to say booths. That's not what it is. Are they? Yeah. Everybody's rocking out. They're singing, right? And that for us, it fuels us. It's fun to engage with people that do have just some knowledge and excitement to play with us. And because I think they're the closest that we've had people, it's been so fun. Like last night was so fun. I was like, this is the favorite, like my favorite time that I've done this so far. Just because like you really are in it with them. We don't leave the stage. We are on stage for 85 minutes. I think the longest break we have is 10 to 15 seconds, if that. And so you're there with them. They're in it with you and you are in it with them. So, and again, like the way that an audience participates collectively really informs the show that they're getting. Because we're playing off of their responses and reactions. So I felt like last night at Proctor's, like the audience was just like a good audience. They were excited to be there. They were not only like polite, but they went like above and beyond in the respectful way. You know what I mean? Like the appropriate ways. They didn't like shout out at the wrong times, but were very engaged, very generous with their applause, like understood the moments where we would kind of like be cheeky and they would give us a response. We'd be like, yes, right, exactly. So it made it really fun.
I say, how far along are you in the tour?
So this cast has been with the tour. We opened on April 16th. So just a few weeks ago. I have been with the show for over 2.5 years though.
Yeah.
I did the national in entirety, 16 months. And then I always went back and forth with the Broadway company since the beginning. And then the second national went out, which is, so sorry. This tour that you are seeing is the second national tour. Okay. So the Boleyn tour, because it's the second, and Boleyn was the second wife of Henry VIII. The first one was called Aragon. And that has been out for 16, 18 months already. And we are the second company. So the original cast just went out in April, and we are the second cast.
Have you gotten a sense, I don't know if it's like too fresh of like being in different places? As you said, Proctor's had such a lively, fun vibe. Are there places where maybe it's a little bit more remote and they aren't familiar with the show that it just feels very different?
Totally. Oh my goodness, totally. I don't want to name names. But absolutely. I mean, you know what's kind of great is I love a challenge. I really love seeing people, right? Because there's like you get all walks of life, all people, especially those like smaller towns, people that are like in the audience. You can tell like they have no idea what they've gotten themselves in. It starts, we look them dead in the eyes. They're like, oh no, I don't know what I signed up for, and they're so not there for that. And what I have found, I was actually just talking about this. There was someone in the audience. Do you mind if I tell this story?
Go ahead.
So there was someone in the audience in this very, very small town, one that, you know, would be one that we're describing. And, you know, a young person, maybe high school age, just sat, you know, like this, their arms crossed the whole time. It was like the story I had painted was like the parents had forced this person to come see the show because like they knew that it was empowering and inspiring. And but boy, yikes. And they were in the first couple of rows, which, you know, if you don't know, those are like, it's the wet zone, right? It's like getting on, or like you will get wet. And so throughout the course of the show, I always know, like, you know, the show is so diverse. It's all shapes, sizes, colors. It's my favorite word to describe the show is inclusive. And so because it's not Rodgers and Hammerstein, every queen has their own style of music. And, you know, for PR reasons, we've sort of like likened each queen to a different type of pop icon. And of course, every story is so different. That's why it's a competition-esque show. We're competing to see who had, you know, had it worst, even though Henry like was the worst, and that's why they all were the worst. I digress. This person starts to show, their arms are, you know, crossed over. And I'm, in my mind, having seen this happen time and time again, I just wait. I just wait and I just observe as the show is going on. And, you know, they're really sticking to their guns, especially after House of Holbein, where, boy, if you're past the middle of the show and it's such a silly kind of like intermission piece, and it's, you know, I don't want to give away too much, but it's very, very silly. And so if people aren't with you at that point, you're, you know, so, you know, they're kind of, they're doing the like arm clap and the lap clap. And we get to Parr, who's the sixth wife of Henry VIII. So we've been here, right? This is like the end of the show. And all of a sudden, this person goes like this, you know, hand under the chin on their armchair. And then all of a sudden they're like nodding their head. And by the time that we're doing 6, and, you know, we do this kind of like call and response repeated choreography. This person is kind of like bobbing their head and kind of like, you know, looking around to make sure that it's like safe to enjoy. And that's why I do the show. And what I also love about it, if you will, is like the show is that our whole is greater than the sum of our parts. And so the fact that like Boleyn didn't really get, you know, this person on board, what I love is that I still am an ensemble member, because if you're not the queen proper that's, you know, telling their story, you then play the ensemble for them. And so I loved that was the queen that they connected to. And, you know, in short, in a nutshell, that was kind of like a roundabout way of saying like, that is 6. Like at some point in the piece, you're like, yeah, that's me. I want to reclaim that piece of me. That piece I see myself, whether it be size, shape, color, ethnicity, like, or my story. You know, each queen had something completely different happen in their life. And that's why it's one of the most famous stories. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Doing the show on the road versus doing it in New York City. Does it change much for you? Because you've got those small town folks who come into the city to see the show.
Sure.
Yes, you're going home and sleeping in your own bed at night versus a different hotel every couple of days. Beyond that, what's the ephemeral, if you will, difference between taking it on the road and being in New York?
Sure. Do you mean my experience of different audiences and theaters, or do you mean me personally, like how I take care of
you personally, you know, the first time you walk out, I would imagine, as an actor on stage in New York, in Broadway, you've got to have a, whoo, I'm on Broadway moment.
there? Yeah, absolutely.
That's got to pass at some point, or doesn't
Yeah.
it?
For me, it never does. But that I'm such a full of life, like expressive, animated, full out with feeling type of human being. And like, I'm such a sensitive flower. So like, it always matters to me. Right. But I think what I appreciate and what's different for me on tour versus doing it on Broadway is that I do understand the responsibility, if you will, of holding art in these places that don't necessarily get to go to New York. They don't have even the funding to, make a trip or spend hundreds of dollars on a ticket. And, I also am a mentor, a teacher and such. And what I like to say, and I like to, practice what I preach, is like, I'm not necessarily performing for the person in the front row, which is funny because I've just spent how much time talking about how I perform to the person in the front row. But I like to say there's like a handful of people that I am performing for. And one of the main people that when I get out on stage and performing for, especially on tour, is that person, that last row, that standing room seat that, somebody spent their $20-$30. They came, they waited in line for rush seats, and they just had to see the show, even if I am as big as a Lego, that's who I'm telling this story for, because oftentimes those are the people that need it. They need the art. They need to hear these stories. They need that escapism. That's the difference. Especially when the Lena Horne is small. Like, these theaters are so much bigger. So you have the ability to reach so many more people. And in terms of taking care, it's so funny. I've been talking about routine, especially going from an offstage life to an onstage life. For one, I started reading a book. I was like, what? But gosh, the care. We have been laughing because, we've been in it now. This cast has been in it for long enough to where our bodies are now starting to become conditioned and becoming tired and achy. And so you kind of have to care in a totally different way for yourself. And we have joked recently about the fact that the upkeep of ourselves and the prep of the show and then the warm down of the show on both ends are longer than the show in entirety. So like 7:30 tonight, I start getting ready at like 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Wow.
Once the show is over at like, what, if it's a 7:30 show, 9 o'clock, come 9 o'clock, it will take me 2 to 3 hours until I am warmed down, stretched out. Like, the show is that much of a demanding piece that within 85, and again, we don't leave the show. So, and we're also in costumes that are upwards of, 15, 17 pounds. They are cumbersome. They're made out of plastic and vinyl. They are the reigning Tony Award winner for best costume for, the next month or so. So all of that combined, is very demanding. So yeah, I'm learning how to tend to myself in a different way. Whereas before, when I was off stage, it was all about conditioning to contain an endurance and a sustainability so that I could be shot out of a cannon at any point of time in any of 4 principal people. Whereas now it's like, how do I maintain one vocal part, all of this energy going down on my right knee 20 times in a show where it's not balanced out? The muscular fatigue, the vocal fatigue, all of that, and honestly, I love it. I'm so happy when I get to the theater. I'm like, I'm so excited. People are like, how have you been for over 2.5 years? You're just so excited to do the show every day. I'm like, because it's I'm stoked.
I'm sorry, were you a voice major in school? Theater, musical theater, biology, neuroscience? I mean,
So funny. I actually I did shows on Broadway the years that I would have gone to school. And so, I did audition for like 2 schools and then booked another job. But, yeah, that is so cuckoo bananas to me. I really feel like there are pluses and minuses, of course. But, I did end up going to school during the pandemic for child development, because honestly, I didn't know if I was ever going to perform again. And so, I was like, well, what can I possibly, get into? And yeah, that was something interesting, but nope, I got nothing. I got nothing but life experience and a resume. Yeah, but what's so funny is that I think one of the reasons that I'm grateful that I never went to school, because I do have to convince myself at times, is that you know, I am a life learner, and I think sometimes in compensating for feeling like, oh my gosh, I didn't go, I don't have that network, or that education, or, you know, the diploma, is that, you know, I have remained in training. Like I studied singing, dancing, acting. I was a competitive dancer growing up, 40 hours a week at points at a conservatory. And so I still, every single week, I'm diligent. I do a voice lesson every single day. I do a warm up, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. Like I am checking in. Like this is my life. I make sure that I'm in acting class. I make sure that I'm, you know what I mean? Like mentoring other people. I make sure that I teach. I make sure that, that singing, dancing, that I'm also like stretching. I'm also taking dance class. I'm also taking dance class of genres that are not Six the Musical. Like, when was the last time I did a ballet bar? Often. You know what I mean? Like when I'm doing vocal lessons, I'm singing things that are more classical, operatic, things like that, so that I'm balancing out life. And I still have those teachers. So for that reason, like I never went to college, but I never left it, if that makes sense.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, you said like around 2 o'clock is when you start getting ready. So on the road, like what does that process look like to mentally and physically and vocally prepare yourself for the night?
Yeah. So around like 2 o'clock, listen, once we get into the costume, we can't get out. So I have to set my hydration up like first and foremost of the day, because you can't go to the bathroom. And we have a very regimented like hour before the show. We have like wig calls and costume calls based upon like weight of the costume, cumbersomeness of the costume, like how many of us can be walking up and downstairs to be getting our wigs on with the costume on. Like Boleyn and Aragon get their wigs on first, and then they get their costumes on last because they're the most cumbersome and Aragon is the heaviest. So we have them on last, right? But come 2 p.m., I got to make sure that I'm drinking my salt water so that, you know, I'm hydrated in the right way, and taking care of my body. I start stretching. I make sure that I've eaten, because I also don't like to perform on a full stomach. And I call the costumes the coffin. Like, I can't really have, you know, steak and potatoes in my system while trying to like breathe through plastic. I make sure that I eat like well in advance, so that the things that I'm eating later on in the day are more like raisy things, snacky things, you know, like high protein but small but mighty, like a hard boiled egg or nuts, things like that. But full meal earlier in the day. I then get in like a very hot like bathroom. Sometimes that includes the shower, for like a 15 to 30 minute. I do like a laryngeal massage, as well as doing a full vocal warm up, then a speech warm up for my voice. Like right now, I'm getting over a sinus infection. Don't mind me, but making sure that like that's also warmed up. Physical warm up, rolling out, which is it's depending on how my body feels that day. I'll do some ahead of time, but usually that's post. Sometimes I like to get a class in too, like a bar or a hot yoga class. Sometimes it's like berries, like running and lifting weights. It just depends. Like I just have to listen to my body at all points of time. But at that point, I mean, you're kind of near like a 3:30, 4 o'clock, which means I put my wig prep in, usually at home. Gives me a little more time there. And review any notes that I might have. I practice all of my like singing notes as well, like vocal notes, just checking like where am I today? What's available to me? Also like body wise, like, do I need to sign up for PT? Like, how's my sciatica hanging in? Like, you know, what's my neck doing? It's pretty sore today. But from there, like I head to the theater because I have to be ready by 6:30 for that hour call. Then it takes me, you know, 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending, to do my makeup, to then make sure that, you know, wig, costume, all of that, IEMs. That's pretty much it. And then we do the show. It's 85 minutes.
And then
Wow.
you need an hour and a half to come down.
I timed it. It is an
2
hour,
hours.
2 hour. Well, yeah, because I need to be regimented. Tell me you've been a universal swing without telling me you've been a universal swing. But yeah, I have timed it. It's an hour to 15 to an hour and 45 on my end, depending on like how much I need to stretch and roll out my body. Also just like the stimulation, like bringing that down. I put on like blue light amber glasses, which help like also like getting in bed, reading, like the lights have to come down. I have to create an atmosphere. But honestly, that's just to like counter everything that's come at us. What else? Yeah, I'm losing my train of thought, but that's that on that.
It's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. Yeah.
You
And people are
mentioned.
like, Dan, like you get paid to go to the theater and then just like stand on stage for 85 minutes. I'm like, all right, you put on the costume and do it. You put on the costume and you walk through the smoke at the very beginning. You try to find your ex without falling over through a mic. You
People,
tell
right,
me.
they have
Yeah.
no clue. You
No.
clearly laid it out. We reach a point in every show,
Mhm.
every podcast, where Ellen has some very specific questions, and we're there.
That's right.
Excellent.
We're at the close-up segment. This is our last 5 minutes, or as you guys would say, 5 more minutes, right? We're 6. Here we go. So this is
Exactly.
all about you, Cassie. We're gonna ask you some rapid fire
Ooh.
questions just to like get to know you a little bit more personally. So when was the moment in your life where you just knew like I have to do theater?
Birth.
Love it.
It
Love
was
it.
I've always had like these little nugget moments. There have been like a handful of them. One was when I saw a production of West Side Story. Another was when my very first show that I did was Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I was in the ensemble. I was like third girl from the left dancer, kicking my face. I saw the girl, like the lead girl, singing the song on stage and just like looking out with a light on her. And I was like, how do I do that? I want to do that. When I saw West Side Story, I saw the Anita and how it affected the audience when she sang A Boy Like That. And I was like, how do I do that? I want to do that. Similarly, growing up, like I saw dancers who like emoted on stage in these like musical theater categories. And I was like, that, how do I do that? So like throughout time, I become inspired, re-inspired. And when I find the point in my life where I'm not, I think I'll probably be done, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Is there
But
a
yeah,
specific Oh, yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say, is there a specific show that you didn't list that had a really big impact on you, whether seeing or being part of?
I feel like the ones that growing up was like Grease and Meet Me in St. Louis and Singing in the Rain. Like those ones were just the ones that we had on VHS. And like just watched them over and over and over again. Like those classic movie musicals, The Wizard of Oz. Like I was a huge Shirley Temple and Judy Garland fan. So, and Gene Kelly. Just those also Barbara Streisand. Like, come on, Funny Girl, please, Gypsy. Like Bernadette Peters. Like, yeah, I mean, those are the main ones.
What did your family think when you said, I'm gonna go do theater?
They didn't have they what? No. I went my own way. I've been the black sheep since day one. Nobody had a say. Unfortunately, I didn't even have a say. I said, this chose me. I didn't choose this.
Yeah.
Please, I would have been a doctor. If I could do anything else, I would.
Are there
But
some
you are,
bucket
in a
list?
way, you're tending to people in a
Yeah,
whole different
Yeah.
fashion, Cassie.
yeah. I bring the best medicine, which is laughter. At least I try.
Are there some bucket list shows and roles?
Sure. I really want to play Anne in Anne Juliet one day. I love Dot in Sunday in the Park with George. Yeah. And I would love to originate something. Also, I'm like dying to do burlesque. No, I'm just like, I really like that show. So I'm like, let's go.
There's a friend of mine, a gal that I performed with a number of years ago. There's a WWE musical now.
You're kidding.
No, and she's doing all this kind of, stunt, kicking, falling, pratfall stuff as a professional wrestler would be. I've been following her. It's fascinating. Talk about keeping your body in shape.
Truly. They think of everything these days.
Yeah. Well, this has been a complete joy. And sadly, since we're running out of time, we want to be able to say goodbye to you before we get kicked off of Zoom. But Cassie Silva, this has been lovely talking to you. And we're so excited you're here in Schenectady doing Six. And we can't wait to see what you're doing next.
Yeah,
And Cassie is here through the 12th of this month. And then they move on to a theater that she will love, but not as much as clearly she loves Proctor's.
exactly.
And Proctor's loves you as well. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your tour. And wow, you've really been inspiring. I think some of the info you shared with us about how you care for yourself. And we've talked to a lot of performers, but you really broke it down. That was its own lesson. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
And for our listeners,
Until next time.
until next time, exactly. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. Be well.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything,